When the Saints go marching in, yes, I want to be in that number. When the Saints go marching in.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Total Saints podcast. It's our weekly get-together where we discuss all things relating to Southampton Football Club. We're live streaming our podcast on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Twitch. And if you're watching along on Sunday evening, you can leave your comments and questions as we go. As always, a massive thank you to our TSP patrons who make all of this possible. You can visit patreon.com/Total Saints podcast to find out more about getting involved. Coming up this week on the pod, if last week's episode was called How Soon is Too Soon to Sack a Manager, then this week's has to be called What a Difference a Week Makes. We had our first win at Everton in 26 years, and it was well worth the wait. Also a midweek win against Manchester City. I mean, we all saw that coming, didn't we? So not a lot to discuss there. There's another big game at St Mary's this weekend. We're going to preview the visit of Aston Villa, and later we'll chat through some of the latest transfer rumours that are doing the rounds this week. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined by Steve Grant, who's the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen de la Cour is the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Alfie House is the Southampton reporter for the Southern Daily Echo. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 217 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, last week we started with a bit of a group therapy session about the new manager, and I kind of feel that's where we need to begin this week, but for completely different reasons. The first question that I've written down, what on earth has happened this week? Glenn, what's changed? What's gone on? How do we sum it up?
Well, I mean, you got to start off by saying, hands up, we've won 3 games in a week. When was the last? Who was the last manager that ever achieved that for us? I mean, maybe we have before. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. I am absolutely at a loss to explain how against Forest, Nathan Jones thought the best tactic to get a result out of that game was booting it up in the floodlights for 95 minutes. And then 1 week later, we are pressing and playing Manchester City off the pitch. And how many training sessions would there have been between those 2 games? Bearing in mind there was the Palace game in the middle of it as well. So they would have maybe trained once before the Palace game, maybe once afterwards. So 2 training sessions, and you've got 2 completely opposing performances, one which was diabolical and one which was kind of brilliant at the end of the day. And from that game against Manchester City, I think because we win the Man City game, it's probably the reason why we went into the Everton game with a lot more confidence. And even when we went 1-0 down, we I was quite confident we were going to get back into it at half time. I know there was a bit of doom and gloom about the first half performance, but I don't actually think it was that bad. So with regards to Nathan Jones, he obviously gets credit because he's either changed his football philosophy overnight or he's listening to other inputs. And to be honest, either is a strength. Either is to be applauded because football at the end of the day is a results business, and he's got the results. I didn't see it coming, and I still defend the point of view that I think we all had after the Forest game, because that was so inept. And looking back now, what annoyed me most about that was that he never really acknowledged that it was inept. He just kind of said, well, we missed a chance and Lianco made a mistake. And I came away from that game thinking, oh, right, so you think that was all right? It really wasn't. And looking back now, that kind of informed my entire point of view. But there's a couple of things that I've seen that at the end of games that sort of like that they seem to hold him in high regard, the players. There was sort of incidents with at the end with Ruben Selles was involved. So that's obviously another relationship that's going well. So if we keep playing like that, I don't think people are going to have a problem with him. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some, but if we keep trying to play that way, then I don't think many people are going to have a problem with the manager. I mean, some of his press conferences, which I'm sure we're going to get onto.
Oh, we will, yeah.
So you cannot possibly complain about the last week, even if you think the first half performance against Everton was slightly dodgy.
We're talking about the extremes here, Steve, but does this week perfectly sum up what it's like to be a Southampton fan? You think you hit rock bottom, and then you're on top of the cloud nine, and we're pulling a couple of great results out the bag.
Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate roller coaster, isn't it? That sort of 2 weeks of completely contrasting emotions. That, I mean, as Glenn said, we were just absolutely atrocious against Forest, and you're kind of thinking, well, hang on, new manager bounce was supposed to have happened at some point in the previous 2 weeks, and we've had none of that. And actually, it somehow managed to get worse, which is actually quite some feat, I think. And yeah, to have then pulled these 3 results out of the bag. I mean, Palace, as we said last week, was kind of a functional performance. Really, it was more a case of getting away from just humping it up into the air. We actually tried to play a little bit of football and actually realised that we're perfectly capable of doing that. And then we've obviously thrown in the sort of high intensity pressing, which I think actually has just surprised Man City. I don't think they were expecting it because, let's be honest, we've not played that way much at all this season. Maybe Chelsea game, maybe spells of that Leicester away game, maybe. But other than that, we've been quite passive for the whole season, really. And I mean, when you come up against someone like City, you always need them to have an off day as well as things go well for you. And I mean, certainly City were bad. And I mean, they didn't get an awful lot better at the weekend at Old Trafford either. So they're in a bit of a rut, but fair play. You've got to take advantage of it, and we did. And much like that Chelsea game back in August, we probably should have won by more. The two goal margin wasn't really a reflection on our dominance, I think. So yeah, it's been an excellent week, and it's all a little bit unnerving, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah.
Albeit still with that rather significant caveat that we are still bottom, still the strongest team in the league, holding everyone else up.
Alfie, what are you putting it down to? I mean, I'd love to say that he obviously sat down and listened to the podcast last week, made a few notes, probably spent a couple of hours scrolling through Twitter, seeing what people were saying and picking up on what he was doing wrong. But what have you put it down to? Because it's remarkable. I mean, you wouldn't have written this, you couldn't have predicted this. So what has it been for you?
Yeah, I think he told us on Thursday that he doesn't listen to any podcasts, doesn't read the press, doesn't read social media.
And yet he called out Paul Doswell.
Yes, I'm not convinced that he's telling 100% truth there. But what I will say is that everything that he has said has in theory come true. He said that he just needed one performance, one result to sort of lift the group, and maybe that will be the catalyst for them to play better, to maybe put that press into action. And he got it. Like you say, it was a functional performance against Crystal Palace. It wasn't brilliant, it didn't tear up trees, but they won the game. They got into the 4th round, and from there it's obviously bounced. And I think the relationships, the positivity has to be the most important thing. I know Glenn alluded to it a moment ago, but you saw James Ward-Prowse pushing Nathan Jones towards the fans and making sure that he was getting his moment. And he mentioned Ruben Sellers, where he went over and they locked heads for a moment. I don't know what they said because his Welsh accent is too thick to mouth read, but it's they're clearly getting on very well. So I think it has to just be relationships and positivity, because at the end of the day, it's still the same players. Orsic and Charlie Alcaraz have played 20 minutes between them. It's not as if they've come in and given everybody a massive lift. But yeah, it's just really, really enjoyed it. And as I was saying before we went on air, the feeling of those last 2 games, against Man City, I've never really experienced anything like that in my sort of 18 months covering the club. And then when James Ward-Prowse scored that free kick at Goodison Park, I lost my head completely. It was he's going on that character arc again where he saves the club, not single-handedly, because that'd be a little bit disingenuous, but it's almost single-handedly.
And Glenn, I just want to talk about the games that we lost. Looking back, Brighton and Fulham, they seem at the moment, those are the informed teams. Were we looking at those games going, well, we've got to win these, these are must-win games, these are big 6-pointers. And have we, to a certain extent, underestimated that little run of fixtures? Because we were talking about how key that was going to be. And actually, those two are the informed teams right now.
Yeah, I think that the tendency is to look at anyone outside the traditional big boys and think you should be getting points from that. Looking back now, well, we said at the time, Brighton were really good. there's no getting away from that. Brighton were, and they've proved that since the run of results they've been on. Fulham, I seriously don't think they're very good. I still don't think they're very good, and I think we should have got more out of that game. But the Notts Forest game, as we've said before, was the, hopefully that was the low point, and we're not going to sink that low again. So having lost that, I mean, most people would have predicted a win against Forest and getting beaten by Everton. So we've done it the other way around, which is actually better, obviously, because the Everton game being the more recent one. So yeah, we probably did underestimate the strength of the opposition a little bit, but it's certainly in Brighton's case. But I think we can move on now, and I know it's Aston Villa next, who are a bit of a mixed bag since they come back after the World Cup. I think they've won 2, lost 1. So it's certainly another game that we shouldn't fear, having seemingly found a way that we can get results.
And Alfie, just talk to us a little bit about Nathan Jones as a man. He still comes across as a little bit spiky to me, perhaps, in some of the press conferences. He was very defensive after the Man City game. You're sat in front of him, you're putting questions to him. Is he a little bit wary of the media? Is he perhaps not used to the criticism? What sort of a character is he? Are you starting to warm to him a bit more now?
Yeah, I think what sort of character is he? I think he's a pretty normal bloke, to be fair. And I think what I mean by that is he obviously takes offence to things, and he does clearly take things personally. And again, he said that he doesn't. He only took umbrage with one thing, and that was, of course, the BBC Radio Solent interview. But he clearly isn't only taking umbrage to that. He's taking umbrage for a number of things, supporters, chants, all the criticisms he's had, and perhaps that even came from within the playing group initially. After those first few performances where they didn't win, they could have easily. You see a bounce now, and it could have been that there's conversations that have been had in the group, and they've all managed to sort of put their differences aside, if you will, and actually realise that it's for the greater good, so to speak. He told us that, and he's honest as well. He's very honest, and perhaps a little bit too honest, but it's great for us because he told us that during the Man City game, two of his players approached him and said, "Look, Gaffer, we don't think we should go to a 5 at the back," and he said very diplomatically, "Good, thanks for telling me that, but we're going to, because I'm paid to make the decisions. I'm more than happy to listen to you, but we're going to do it, and this is why they did it, and they got the result." So little things like that, tell me a little bit about him as a man. But my personal opinion is that I really, I do like him a little bit, to be fair. I think he's interesting to listen to. I think he doesn't come across brilliantly well in 140 word quotes, and I have to hold my hands up, as a journalist who puts his quotes out on Twitter. I'm certainly, that's part of my responsibility as well. But when he says things like, I've taken flack and I have to batten down the hatches and stuff, that's in a long monologue. That's a long monologue of praise and positivity. You'll say that he has to batten down the hatches from fan criticism. Somebody will put that out, and then all of a sudden people go, why didn't he just leave it? And you get that. But yeah, I enjoy him. I think he's a little bit spiky, a little bit emotional, but he's got to the top level as a manager.
And Glenn, I know Nathan Jones out was trending last week. It's probably fair to say that something like humble pie would be trending this week. I know you and I had a brief conversation about it, but is it more to do with the age that he's a manager in and the spotlight that's on the Premier League? And I know we were drawing comparisons to Ian Bramford last week, but back in the day, all we could do was print out the red cards, go to the game and protest in that way and wait for a fanzine to come out. There's so many more. There weren't podcasts, there weren't forums, there weren't blogs, there wasn't Twitter back in those days. Is it just, does that come with the territory and come with the job? There's going to be that spotlight, and we're going to be, people like you, people like myself, we're going to be talking about this because we've got a platform to do it, and we're fans and we want to get it off of our chest.
Yeah, and people can comment instantly now before they've had a chance to think about it. The reason I know this is because I do it.
And it's there for eternity.
And it's there for eternity. And people retweet a post that you made 13 years ago or whatever about Nigel Atkins getting sacked. Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, and not everybody's got a qualified opinion, as you know. I mean, I've always, just by appearing on this podcast, you kind of make yourself a target a little bit, and it's just one of those things that you have to accept and get on with, really. And previously, we like, as you say, we didn't have things like this, and it was just a case of you just had to sit back and shut up, and no one had a voice. And obviously, sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not. And But I think most people in football now, they understand that that's the case. So with going back to Nathan Jones, he knows how the world works with the social media and stuff. He's been around football long enough. Even when he was, around playing lower league stuff, you would get it, and you're much more likely to have someone come up to you in the street, I imagine, when you're manager at Luton or playing for Yeovil or whatever. So no, he knows how it works, and obviously in the Premier League it's amplified, and it'll be interesting to see how he deals with things from here on in. But I've noticed that if you want to call it the gaffes per minute, if you like, or the silly statements per minute, has gone down over the games that we've been playing. So maybe it's because we won, but I didn't think his. I personally, I don't mind him hitting back at people. I don't mind that. The thing I find a little bit cringy about what he does is that when he talks about himself a little bit, and he's massaging of the figures. Well, the Liverpool game doesn't count, and I've got a 50%.
50%. Yeah.
If I include these three games,
you can be damn sure that Liverpool game would have counted if he got a result in it.
Yeah, I've been here for one day, and we did that. Yeah. So, yeah, swings and roundabouts with social media and the world we live in. But and he knows the drill.
It's good. It's all fun. Let's get on to some football then. 1997 was the last time we won a game at Goodison Park. I believe you were there, Glenn.
Yes.
1997. It wasn't looking great at half-time, but up stepped James Ward-Prowse. So let's get into the football, shall we, and some of the formations and things from yesterday. Steve, was that really what was missing? Just James Ward-Prowse playing a bit further forward? Was that what was wrong these last few weeks? Is it as simple as that?
Possibly. I mean, whether it was him or whether it was someone, we needed somebody to step up as kind of the link man between the midfield and the attack. Because while kind of the two have been kind of functioning as separate entities for most of the season, they need to work in tandem and work as a partnership. And I mean, I've banged on about this quite a lot this season, that we've created loads of chances this season and just keep missing them. And now finally we've got a little bit of confidence, and suddenly we're scoring. Musa Gineppo scoring a lob from 30 yards. It's madness times. And yeah, I mean, I think the system change where I think Jones has finally accepted that the three at the back is as dead as a dodo. It's not work. It doesn't work for us. It invites too much pressure. I think it's okay sort of late in games as a sort of protection mechanism. I don't mind it in that situation, because ultimately you're likely to be having loads of balls just pumped into the box. It's like, well, if you've got an extra big man in there to head the stuff away, then absolutely fine. But as a starting formation, I think we've now firmly established that four at the back is the way to go. And just the structure when Lavia is fit and available from the start just makes such a difference. And I mean, we've said this before, that it's absolutely ridiculous how we're in this situation where a 19-year-old kid who's played perhaps 10 senior games now is basically just such a key component in this team that everything falls to pieces when he's not in it. Or at least not in it in some form, because obviously he's only played an hour the two games since we last recorded, but he's been key in both of them, and he's got us into positions where we've kind of wrestled control of the game. I mean, I thought it was interesting actually yesterday that obviously Lampard went gung ho with the substitution, took Coleman off and brought Anthony Gordon on, and ordinarily, when Saints do that, you would just expect, well, that player is going to have an impact because that's just what happens against us. But he didn't really do an awful lot. He had one movement where he went down the wing and put a cross that Bazunu kind of palmed away. But other than that, he didn't really. Well, I suppose he claims an assist for the winner, doesn't he? Actually,
yeah,
for bundling Che over. But yeah, I think we've learned a lot. In this sort of last week and a half or so, Sarr is an experienced international standard centre back and should be one of the first names on the team sheet. And I'm relieved and delighted that we're finally. I think everybody is all in agreement on this now, including the guy that actually needs to put him on that team sheet.
Pick him, yeah.
And yeah, just having that spine now, where you've got Sarr, you've got Lavia, you've got Ward-Prowse, and then you can kind of interchange people around that. I think we're not necessarily wed to any individuals elsewhere in the system. Really, I think we've got quite a lot of depth that can perform on their day, and it's a case of kind of seeing who's. I guess it's almost a case of seeing who's in the mood in training during the week before, to see who's the guy you're going to stick in that in those sort of attacking areas, who are going to be the difference makers. And yeah, I mean this week it's worked out fine. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be weeks going forward where that doesn't pan out, but cross that bridge when we come to it, I guess.
And Alfie, you were there yesterday. I was listening on the commentary, saw the highlights and stuff today. It felt there was a real kind of show of spirit that perhaps has been missing recently. Although we were a goal behind, you kind of felt like this game is still there, and actually we get back into it. The atmosphere is going to change, and it's there for the taking, and that turned out to be the case in the end.
Yeah, Glen alluded to earlier that the first half, for all I've seen said about it, wasn't that bad. They conceded a goal from another set piece, which has got to stop, because if they keep conceding those set pieces, they will be in trouble. But they did, and like you say, everybody felt, certainly around me, and I think the fans that were at the ground felt that they absolutely would get back into the game. I think Nathan Jones has done well to show loyalty to certain players. Who have then gone on to perform, which perhaps you wouldn't expect them to. I mean, Lianco, for example.
Lianco, yeah. First name on the team sheet almost now.
Well, I think the first name would be James Ward-Prowse, second name would be Cour, then it'd be Romeo Lavia, and then probably would be Lianco for Nathan Jones, honestly. Excuse me. I mean, he's used him in such different ways, and ways that we'd have said, what are you doing? Like when he put him right back against Wilfred Zaha, and again on Saturday he put him right back, and then actually changed him to the centre of the park at half time. Put Mohamed Salisu left back. He's doing things that Ralph Hasenhüttl did and really didn't work, and he's trying them again, and sometimes they're working, and you've got to sort of say, yeah, well, fair enough. I don't know what homework you've done, but it's worked out.
I know, Glenn, you were pleased with the defensive performance. I mean, obviously, it was a free header for the goal, wasn't it? But defensively, looking better. Lianco, I think we're all guilty of saying dreadful, should never play for the club again. And actually, he's turned it around. He's one of the players that seems to have been, they've stuck with him, and now he's looking really promising and up for the fight. And perhaps we're seeing the player that we hoped we would when he signed.
He is a Nathan Jones type of player. And you look at I've moaned about this over the last 2 seasons. We're a team full of nice boys who don't want to get, not really your blood and thunder type of players, too easily intimidated. We don't make the game hard for referees at all. We were just too nice. We sold Oriol Romeo, which again, this is why we look like a bunch of kids earlier on in the season. So, I noticed Alfie put something out on Twitter saying, what do you think the team will be this week? And I read the replies, and I just said, anyone who doesn't think Lianco's playing is wrong. He is absolutely playing. He is one of Nathan Jones's boys, rightly or wrongly. Of course, he's got a ricket in him, and and he does some mad things, doesn't he? I mean, there was that one where he
ended up at left wing, didn't he?
I know. That's exactly the one I was thinking about. He ended up at left wing and then tried to foul someone when he lost the ball. It's just hilarious. But Jones is, as Alfie said, he's Lianco can play right back, or he's moved inside. Salisu can do the same. He seems to pick the starting lineup for flexibility because he doesn't want to burn a substitution in the first half, but he still wants to have the capability of switching to 3 at the back, which is why I think Elyounoussi played, even though, in my opinion, he can't play right wing back because he's just not quick enough. That's why he was in the team, because if you pick, I know you could pick Gineppo over there, obviously. If you pick an Adam Armstrong or something like that, he can't really play right wing back. I know he's not fit, but you couldn't do that with Stuart Armstrong either, probably. So that's why Elyounoussi plays. So I think, with the flexibility. But back to the defence, I like with Manchester City game, I didn't feel that Everton were going to score. They really had nothing apart from set pieces, and their best passer of the ball is the goalkeeper. So they give the ball to him, smash it up front towards Calvert-Lewin, and Chiletazar was like, well, "Thanks, I like this." I'm just going to hit everything. And they
Calvert-Lewin looks an absolute shadow of the player he was 3 years ago, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he's got Che Adams syndrome at the moment. When we were bad before this week, Calvert-Lewin's up there and he's not getting any ball that's under 8 foot high, and he doesn't really have a chance. And Everton last year had Richarlison, and who was a good player, and they've replaced him with Neil Maupay, and he got one goal this season. So it's no wonder they're gonna really struggle. But I thought our defending was good. And going back to Chiletazar, he makes the difference, because out of all the centre halves we've got, he is solid and dependable. There's nothing rash about him. He doesn't have a ricket in him, and he doesn't doze off. And I think all of the other three, Salisu, Bella-Kotchap, and Lianco, they've all got flaws, but Chiletazar just seems to be this sort of really solid player. It's interesting what Jones has said about him this week, saying
being a footballer, not a defender, wasn't it? Was that the quote, Alfie? That was
Yeah, well, obviously I asked him just, why wasn't he starting effectively? You must be pleased he's in now. And yeah, exactly that. He said he was trying too hard to be a footballer and not a defender, and he just needs to remember that he's a defender first. And it's about going back to basics, isn't it? That's what Nathan Jones is trying to do. Just trying to get everybody doing what they can do rather than trying to do things they can't. And I think James Ward-Prowse is in that as well. Stop having him defend, just let him shoot at the goal, because he's the only person in the team that can.
Do you think he'll still be in the market for another defender, Alfie? If he's saying actually this there's a player that's already in the squad that has learned in the last couple of weeks and he's been able to coach him properly, do you think they'll still be in the market for another centre defender?
If he wants to play this free at the back, then he probably does have to. But I mean, I don't really think they need to. If Salisu and if Bella-Kotchap is going to be back in the next few weeks, I don't see why you would need another one. Personally, Chiletazar is better than I thought he was, and I think we're seeing that now. And I'd be more than happy with him for the rest of the season if he stays fit.
Yeah, we'll get on to transfers a bit later and we'll pick your brains on that. Steve, 2 points between the bottom 7 teams. We're in form. We've certainly dragged a few others into it, but momentum's going to be key these next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what happens. I mean, obviously it's entirely in our own hands, but also in terms of the sort of general overall picture, that so many games between teams are in and around us. So you've got Everton against West Ham next week is basically a loser. Loser probably sacks their manager game. And I mean, Villa aren't. I mean, Villa are a little bit away from us now, but they've been poor for big parts of this season. So I don't think they probably are effectively safe because they'll get enough points, but they're not sort of immune from having to look over their shoulder a little bit. So that game's still a big game on Saturday, even for them, even though they're kind of away a little bit now at the moment. But it's so tight down there, it's ridiculous. I mean, like, people were banging on saying, "Oh, look at the Championship, like between 4th and 17th, there was like 3 points or something at one point about 6 weeks ago." I mean, you've got, as you say, two points separating 7 teams, and then I think only another, was it 4 points?
Yeah, 4 or 5.
With the two sides above them. So yeah, I mean, Forest have won 2 games in the space of a week, and suddenly they're on 20 points and looking quite
strange
good.
Season.
I mean, I still fully expect Forest to get dragged back down again, because eventually they'll get found out, because
they weren't great, were they?
At the end of the day, they're not very good. And it's utterly infuriating. But it comes from taking your opportunities against the other teams that are out of form. So they obviously came up against us last week, and Leicester yesterday. And Leicester are an absolute mess, absolute shambles at the moment. And with no James Maddison, they've got practically zero creativity. So not only do they have very little going forward, they've obviously still got their absolute train wreck at the back. And that's without Yannick Vestergaard. So yeah, I mean they're struggling. Wolves seem to have turned a corner, as you would expect, having appointed a proper manager finally. Spending a little bit of money in the transfer window as well, with their
demeanor,
with their very, very useful, not in any way dodgy links to George Mendes. And yeah, so I fully expect them to be fine. But yeah, and any of the others down there, I mean, you could draw straws for who goes down, other than Bournemouth, who will go down.
Will go down.
I mean, they're just garbage. So bad. They've got nothing in attack, and they're dreadful at the back. That's just, I mean, it's ridiculous how they're not bottom now. It's an absolute indictment on us, West Ham and Everton, that we are below. The three of us are all below Bournemouth at the moment.
Well, we'll get on to the Aston Villa game in just a moment, but we need to talk about Man City, really, just because even the most positive of Saints fans wouldn't have given the team much of a chance for beating City. It's a cup that they've dominated for the last few years, but how wrong we were. Glenn, if the Forest game was the worst we've seen at St Mary's, was the Man City game one of the best in terms of the team performance?
It was just absolutely staggering. Absolutely staggering, the way that game panned out. Just ridiculous. Pep left the door open with his team selection. Goalkeeper, left back, Kyle Walker at centre back. They put a youngster up front, didn't they, on the wing, Cole Palmer. Now, obviously, these are all good players, but everyone, even people who aren't Man City fan, you'd rather face Cole Palmer than Riyad Mahrez, and you'd rather they put the reserve goalkeeper in. But we really played them off the park. I think they thought they were going to beat us easily, to be honest. And
so did we.
Yeah. And any game of football, no matter who you are, if you start it at kind of 75% and then you go behind, it's very, very difficult to suddenly get up to 100%. I don't think City really got up to it. Calvin Phillips in the centre of midfield was a massive weak link, and that was my favourite bit of the game. Was it wasn't not just because it led to Gineppo's goal, but Romeo Lavia just bodying Calvin Phillips out of the way to get the ball and knock it through to Gineppo, and then it's like, why is the goalkeeper there? Why is he?
I love that. I love that we seem to have installed some sort of magnet in the centre circle at St Mary's that just attracts Manchester City keepers out away from their goal line.
It was nice to see. It was good to see.
Dude, it was just a great performance, and then to go those two goals up, the first goal was fabulous. I mean, what a goal that is! What a finish! That was. Graziano Pelle used to score goals like that, where he just the ball just got to him and he just hit it straight away.
He just swept it, didn't he?
Just swept it in, and that was a lovely finish from a player who's not even looked like scoring a goal so far. So that was great. I mean, did you hear the chant? The chant that went up. It was a play on the Nathan Jones one at Crystal Palace, but with Pep Guardiola, your football is.
No, I didn't. I heard the Ricky Lambert one.
It wasn't entirely convincing, because I think we were all frightened at that stage what was going to happen when De Bruyne and Haaland came on in the second half. But they did come on, and the second half was comfortable. Yeah. And as Steve said earlier, if anything, we should have extended our lead. It always felt like 3 decent passes and we would be in. But we didn't quite have the quality to sort of get in that second half and put a third goal away. But, brilliant performances by players who you weren't expecting it from.
There wasn't anybody that was under par, really, was there? You couldn't single anybody out and say they had a bad night or they weren't.
Diallo, Adam Armstrong, Mara, they all performed better than they normally do. So
Gineppo.
Yeah, Gineppo,
man of the match, of course. Don't forget Gineppo getting man of the match.
Not quite sure about that one.
He talked about being aggressive, Alfie. That first sort of 10-15 minutes, I was watching it. I think I looked up and it was like 3 minutes in, and we were already like pushing forward and putting a few tackles in, and that was, to me, that really summed up the aggression that he'd been talking about. It was just the perfect example, and I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And that's actually right. You couldn't believe what you're watching. And obviously, you're trying to be really tentative in the way you're reporting it as well, because you know for a fact that it's Manchester City. And, realistically, 4-0 to them is more likely than 2-0 to Southampton, even in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes. But yeah, like Glenn said, the way it, that 5-minute spell, 2 goals, Sekumara's finish, we're not accustomed to a striker taking a finish like that this season. There's no sight on Chadham's, really important for the 2 goals yesterday. But we don't see that at the moment. And I had a lot of work to do at the time. Obviously, I had to file a late report for the newspaper, and I was scrambling hard. I was really nervous that they were going to come back. And then Haaland came on. I think he touched the ball once, and it was he got his mosquito leg up to a ball that was about 8 foot in the air, but couldn't direct it goalwards. Certainly the best I've seen from Southampton in my time, and absolutely brilliant. I thought that Nathan Jones deserved to have a couple of digs at various people that he did in the press conference after. It was good fun.
He'd earned that right, hadn't he?
It
And
was a good laugh.
Steve, Newcastle over 2 legs?
Well, I mean, chatting to a Newcastle supporting mate of mine this afternoon, he seems to be absolutely terrified now because Bruno Guimaraes went off injured at half-time, seemingly in tears. So I think we're probably assuming that he's going to be out for a few weeks. And the feeling seems to be that when he's not in that team, it's basically half the team. So I mean, if we carry on the sort of structure and the performances that we put in this week, who knows? I mean, second leg away from home's a pain. I mean, just one word for the absolute scandal that is the format of the Carabao Cup semi-finals. By the way, that not only having obviously the advantage of the second leg at home, there is extra time in the semi-final, which is ridiculous. Now, this obviously used to be counteracted by the away goals rule coming into play at the end of extra time. So obviously the home team in the second leg had the extra half hour with their fans behind them, but the away team had the extra half an hour to score an away goal, and obviously with the benefits that brings. But obviously the away goals rule has just been binned completely from seemingly all football, which is fine. But rather than do what they've done throughout the rest of the tournament and just go straight to penalties at 90 minutes, we have to go through this nonsense of another half an hour sort of as the away team, which seems manifestly unfair, really.
They've also got an extra week, haven't they? Because they got knocked out of the FA Cup third round, so they've got 4 days rest on them, I believe. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, yeah, because they obviously got done at Sheffield Wednesday, didn't they?
Surely Newcastle will postpone the game a month like they normally do when they get an injury.
If Kamara's is out, yeah.
The COVID test to be out or something, won't they? We've got a really important game against Aston Villa coming up. Obviously, Unai Emery's gone in. They've had a bit of new manager bounce. Glenn, they're still a team in transition, but it seems that they might be beatable. This is a great chance for back-to-back wins.
Nothing to be scared of. Absolutely nothing to be scared of. They're better under a better manager. Let's face it, everyone was going to be better. A manager. But they've still got the same players. I know we have as well, largely, but they've still got the same players. And when I look at their team on paper, it's okay. I mean, they've still got Ashley Young playing. And they're well, yeah, maybe 10 years ago, but I don't really see anything to be scared of. I feel like they're the sort of team that we will beat if we play well. They're an annoying sort of team. I mean, we lost to them earlier on in the season, didn't we? And it was one of those games where
that was a dreadful game on both sides.
Where Ralph basically set the team up to do nothing, and that's what we did, and we got beat 1-0. And that was when Villa had something like lost their previous 5. It was Gerrard's only win, wasn't it, or something, before he got sacked. So I think we owe them one. Obviously, we've got a new manager now, so that's not going to play on his mind, that particular game. Villa have got threats. They get runners in the box from midfield, like Ramsey, who scored against us last time, and what's his name, Bailey, on the other wing, who scored a good goal at the weekend. But I don't really.
We got the inevitable Ings goal, haven't we?
Yeah, if he's still there, then
he's likely to be playing as well because Watkins got injured on yesterday. So I imagine Danny Ings will be playing. But I think it's the kind of game that we'll go into it with confidence after these 3 wins, and we have to put in a similar type of performance that we've put in the it'll probably be more like the Everton game than the Manchester City game, but I don't see why we can't get a result against these.
I guess the difference now, Alfie, is that we know the team are capable of putting in that result, so we can all be a bit more confident about it, and it's a good chance to go full out and beat Villa, and then we can forget about the league and look at the cup games.
Yeah, supporters can be a little more confident, but I wonder if the sort of the pressure of expectation of performance is there now. They're at home after 3 big wins, and again, the Aston Villa are a team that are probably equal in quality and in desire as to Southampton. So it's not going to be an easy game. I'm just looking at the fixtures that follow it, though. And you've got Brentford, Wolves, Chelsea, Leeds, Leicester, who are all, even Chelsea included, are not very good. So I think you probably take a point against Aston Villa at home. To be honest, if it's a point with a good performance, I'd be quite happy with that. Keep the momentum going. Don't lose a game. Try not to concede a set piece if at all possible. And that's asking for a lot. But I think there's reason to be excited. But I think, I agree with Glenn. I don't think it's going to be a massively dynamic performance. I think there will be a little bit of expectation. I think that might wear on them a little bit. But you just have to hope you can get 1 or 2 goals.
Well, let's move on to some predictions then, since you mentioned it. Jacob called the 2-1 win at the weekend. Glen and Alfie still tied on 14 points for the season. Steve, I'm going to get you to go first on this. Your thoughts on the Villa game and a prediction for you.
Villa are such a weird team, aren't they? It's one of those toss a coin to see which, whether it's the good or the rubbish Villa side that shows up. I think they'll be a bit more structured under Emery. He's a good coach, and he's good at organising a team. And I think they're probably just a little bit further along in their sort of recovery than we are. So, I think as Alfie says, I think probably take a point and move on. I think take the 1-1.
1-1 for you, right? Glenn, score prediction for you?
I'm going to go for a 1-0 win.
Nice. 1-0 win.
Clean sheet.
A clean sheet.
Which won't give any free kicks or corners away, and we will spawn a 1-0 somewhere along the way.
Alfie, how's this one going to play out?
Yeah, I agree with Steve. Unfortunately, he's got in there before me, but I'm going to go 1-0, and I'm going to even put my neck on the line and say, can I have a bonus point if they concede a set piece and James Ward-Prowse scores?
I'll also be happy with the draw, but I'm going to go clean sheet, and I think 0-0 for this one. Okay, we shall see. By all means, if you're watching along live, stick your predictions in the comments. Going to talk about transfers in just a moment. One of the other things we spoke about last week was a lack of communication from Sport Republic, from Ankerson in particular, Martin Semmens perhaps. This week, they gave an interview to the BBC. They were on Radio Solent. Nothing really unexpected or groundbreaking, but I know you were listening along, Glenn. It all seemed to me reassuring. What were your thoughts on what Rasmus Ankerson had to say this week?
Yeah, my overriding feeling when I listened to it was that it was decent. They're both very good talkers. They both make excellent double glazing salesmen. I mean that in the nicest possible way. It was good to hear them. The only thing I had an issue with was this is my bugbear of Rasmus repeating that thing about the Championship being the sixth
best league in the world, isn't it?
Well, he says 6th biggest league, and the biggest is kind of, it's irrelevant really, because it was talking about the manager's experience. I mean, surely the level of football is more relevant rather than how big a league is. But other than that, that's a minor gripe. I thought it was decent, and I enjoyed listening to it, and I thought the questions from Adam Blackmore, at times I think he's a little bit soft, but I thought he asked things in the main that I wanted to know. There weren't many questions there where I kind of thought, I don't care about that, before they answered it. I thought it was decent, so it was good of them to come out. And it's interesting that we just played Everton, and I don't know if people know about what's going on at Everton, but one of the things that they complain about is the lack of communication, the lack of structure, the lack of accountability, all those things that we were kind of pondering last week when Jacob was here. And it was nice to hear our guys, and oddly enough, they were the only board members that turned up at Goodison Park yesterday.
Well, yeah, that's one for another day. Alfie, if we're winning games every week, we're not interested in hearing from them. They're just there and they do their job. So it was great that they did come out. I know you were listening along and tweeting along as well. Was there anything that jumped out for you, or again, were you just kind of reassured by what they had to say, and it was all fairly straightforward?
Yeah, I think as Glenn mentioned there, that the whole Sport Public group and Martin Semmens, they were all at the game yesterday. They were in the dressing room, and they're giving Martin Semmens giving a pat on the back to James Ward-Prowse. They're visible owners. To be fair, you see them at St Mary's, but we hadn't heard from them really. We'd heard from them in one piece through Jacob, and that was really it. So it was reassuring to hear them that they said that things aren't going to go out the window if they go to the Championship, which is still a small possibility. With still bottom of the table. And for a long-term project, it's a multi-club model. It's always going to be a long-term project, but you want to hear that from them. So that was good. And I enjoyed that Rasmus was open about what they're doing with the transfer strategy at the moment. And he said clearly that obviously Joe Shields has gone, so it's not ideal, but I'm running it for now. I've got a little bit of experience. He admitted that he doesn't want to do it forever. He's probably not the best man for the job to do it forever. I think we probably all agree with that. He mentioned that the director of football, I think, will play a role in appointing the director of recruitment as well, which is interesting. So it is, you want all the people, you want all the pieces aligned there. So I enjoyed that as well. And yeah, I just felt that it was nice to hear from them. The timing was obviously good for them, having beat Crystal Palace and then arranging the interview and then obviously beating Man City. It was ideal for them, of course. But we get a bit of luck, and yeah, it was good.
Good. He was obviously talking about transfers at length and how he was going to be handling those. Steve, we've had a couple of new faces come in. No word on a striker yet. Couple of weeks left in the window. Is there's still some business that you'd like to see done, or do the results and the positive performances take the pressure off a little bit?
I think they take the pressure off a little bit, but as I said earlier, we are still bottom of the table. So I think if you can improve what we've got, then by all means take the opportunity to do so. I think Adams was very good second half, I thought, yesterday. First half,
a few comments actually about Adams tonight and his performance.
Yeah, first half I thought he was a little bit off the pace slightly. And what I mean by that is that quite often when we won the ball back, he hadn't got himself back on side quickly enough for us to counter on any sort of speed that would cause Everton problems. Whereas second half he got himself into better positions and was much more able to kind of affect the game. I don't think we created any chances for him to even have a shot, let alone be likely to score from them. But as a sort of link player, he was much more effective second half. But I think we've ultimately got to find a way of getting a centre forward who can kind of do a bit of everything. I think we all know what Che's level is. It might be good enough to keep us up, but I guess it's down to Rasmus to decide whether he wants to take that risk. He's not working for a gambler anymore. So
is it inconceivable, Glenn? We get to the end of the transfer window and we haven't bought a striker in.
I do not want us to get to the end of the transfer window without having brought a striker in. I think it's a possibility that we might not bring one in. I think people tend to forget Sekou Mara now, who was signed at the start of this season. I'm not 100% convinced by him yet. I don't think he's ready to start games and be massively influential in the Premier League. But he's a young player. They want to push, but maybe not this season. So I don't think we're going to go out and spend 25 million or anything like that on a striker. Now I don't know what sort of figures we're talking about for the ones that have been linked. Maybe Alfie will know more about that, but I generally do believe what you said at the start there, that the games that we've won may affect how they view that and how much money they want to actually spend, because we're only going to, we've signed Orsic, who's going to be, you would think when he gets up to speed, is going to be one of the three attacking players in the formation that we're tending to play. So I'm kind of 50-50 on it at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if we bought, a sort of like big centre forward in, because I mean, what we know about Jones is that he wants options. He wants options, and whilst Che can do that job, I'm sure it's not what he would choose to do, to be fighting for long balls and knocking them down, even though he showed with the first goal yesterday how well he can do it. So wouldn't surprise me either way if we signed a striker of more stature physically.
Alfie, chuck us a bone. Let's end on a positive. What are we expecting to see, if anything, this week? Because the rumours that I've read have gone, well, Kyle Walker-Peters could be off, the big club circling around. And then the next thing is we're going to replace him with the right back from Luton, James Bree, I think it is, who looks like he may or may not be coming in. What are you expecting? Are you expecting a quieter week, perhaps, and then a flurry of activity towards the end of the window?
Well, it's interesting that the Newcastle game is on deadline day, isn't it? So that's going to be an interesting day. We're going to do a Chelsea and announce a Ukrainian forward midway through a match, possibly. But James Bree, although the club, obviously, Nathan Jones knows him well, that isn't a replacement for Kyle Walker-Peters. I'm sure you're jesting a little bit. That's just a short-term cover for the fact that Tino Livramento is now had a bit of a setback and
back on crutches, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's unrelated to the ACL, but obviously, these things can take time. We don't know how long that's going to be. So that's just something separate altogether. But Terry Moffey was the guy that Jacob put out about, and a lot of people have been following for the last few weeks. And it looks like today that he's going to go somewhere else, whether that's for like 20-25 million euros. And as Glen said, I can't see them spending 25 million euros on a French league striker who clearly isn't that keen on joining if he's not here already, sort of thing. I don't think Danny Ings is completely dead. I think there's genuinely a chance that Danny Ings could potentially happen. But is that exactly what they need? Is that what they need really? Somebody who obviously scores goals, but like you say, isn't going to be 6'2" at the top of the pitch and winning headers. I don't know. I'm expecting certainly a couple more. 100% expecting a couple more, but I'm as clueless as you are at the moment.
All right. Well, let's hope for some positive news on the transfers. At least some positive rumours this week that we can get stuck into. That'd be good. That's it for this week. Don't forget you can follow us on Total Saints Podcast. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. It's at Total Saints Pod. The website is totalsaints.co.uk. On there's a link to our online shop, and you can drop us an email during the week as well. Of course, we're on Patreon. I mentioned this at the start. This is where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Head to patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. There's 4 different tiers on there, ranging from £5 to £20 a month. Each comes with their own perks, including weekly shout-outs for those patrons in the Francis Benali and the Mick Shannon tier. So, with that in mind, thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, and Matt Hall in the Francis Benali tier. Also, we've got Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed in the Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Alfie. Thank you for watching tonight. It's been a great week. Thank you for all your comments as well, and have a great week. We'll see you again soon.